It's it off to McCaffrey. There he goes. It's a C-Mac attack. McCaffrey, one man defeat.
This is Desmond Johnson on the Bleav and Carolina Panthers podcast, here on the Bleav Podcast Network, the #1 podcast network for professionals. Do you believe? If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and rate the show on iTunes. We're available in your favorite directories: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Luminary, and TuneIn. You can also find us at Bleav.com and at Bleav Podcast on Twitter. And welcome into the Bleav and Carolina Panthers podcast, the 2022 season premiere. If you were on the 3-minute version from earlier today, we have to apologize. I was having some
hopefully not a little bit of a foreshadow for the season.
I was having some internet difficulty, had to go and correct that. And Schuyler's a busy man today. He is all over the place. So I think ESPN is right behind us. So welcome to those that are here with us today. Training camp for the the Carolina Panthers starts this week down in Spartanburg. Schuyler will be down there reporting all week long for Sports Illustrated. If you want to follow him on Twitter, you could do so at Callihan _. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's DEZ Des _3505. Today we're going to get into Schuyler and mine's 6 biggest training camp storylines heading into the 2022 Panthers camp here. We've made it through all the summer. Players are going to start reporting tomorrow, and camp starts on Wednesday. So before we dig in here and get to the nitty-gritty of everything, Schuyler, how are you feeling going into this camp with all the off-season moves, the draft? Matt Rule's still here. Just everything that's gone down since the season ended. How are you feeling going into the training camp? Pretty optimistic or pretty even keeled? Let's say.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty even keeled. I mean, I think clearly the roster has improved. The draft, I thought they did really well. Even though I don't think they have as many high caliber players from this draft class. I mean, you only had 6 picks, so it's probably not going to have that many anyways. But I think they did well with the draft picks that they did have. You addressed the big need with Ikem Ekwonu. You got maybe your quarterback of the future, Matt Corral. I think they got a stud linebacker in Brandon Smith, a couple of other depth guys down the chart there. So, with that and obviously the upgrades that they made on the offensive line, I think you got to feel good about where things are headed, because I think last year, it was kind of a weird offseason. You signed Cam Irving, Pat Elflein, day one free agency. Everyone's all ticked off. They passed on the quarterbacks. It was just kind of a weird offseason, even though they did have some good signings. This one, I think the whole fan base, I think, is kind of on the same page. They like the direction that this team is heading in terms of, the moves that they made to improve the O-line. They got a quarterback in here that could maybe help them win now. So I think, at least there's a chance, right? 2 weeks ago, I think you would still feel better, but with Sam Darnold and P.J. Walker, Matt Corral as your quarterbacks, I don't know how good you really feel. So I think just having Baker here, I think, is definitely going to give people a little bit of hope.
I'm excited. I was thinking about it last year. I wasn't as excited last year at this time as I am this year, primarily because we kind of knew going into it at this point that it was Sam Darnold to be the starter, and we didn't have anything really.
It was PJ Walker, and that's it.
Yeah, it was PJ Walker and Sam Darnold. They were in the room. That was it, and we didn't know.
And my boy Will Greer, but he got beat out.
Oh yeah, Will Greer was in there too. Yeah, plus we were coming off a year where our Superman Christian McCaffrey had been injured for the first time really in his football career and missed a large chunk of games, so we didn't know what was going to happen there. And like you alluded to, Schuyler, the offensive line, it literally looked like it was something that they decided to kick down the road, like what they did with the offensive line this point last year, bringing in Elflein and some of those guys who we all kind of knew weren't starters in the league, but they were touting them as such. So we were a little concerned about that, and that kind of played out the way many of us thought it would over the course of the 2021 season. But there were some positives in the season. The Panthers defense finished 2nd overall in yards allowed, which is pretty nuts considering the core of that defense has been drafted over the past 2 drafts, really. And we saw some bright spots. DJ Moore secured a bag, got his extension. This is criminally underrated wide receiver. He's had 1,100 yards each of the past 3 seasons. I think he's one of a handful of wide receivers to ever do that. And if you consider who's been throwing to DJ Moore since he got to Carolina, that's pretty remarkable in itself. Definitely a top 10 wide receiver. Madden, if you're listening, DJ Moore is a top 10 wide receiver. We're not going to go to the whole Madden ratings thing that everybody does the last 2 weeks of July when there's nothing else going on. We're going to get past that, even though there's a lot of Panthers on there that I thought were kind of strangely rated. They have McCaffrey rated as the second highest running back in the whole thing. He hadn't really played in 2 years, so I can't say one way or another about those. But before we get into our biggest storylines for the training camp for 2022, do need to pay some bills here from our sponsors at Bet Online. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, and events with first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports information, from live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to join today and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code Bleav50, that's BLEAV 50 to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. And where we will start are our 6 big storylines heading into 2022 training camp. And Mr. Callihan, I will let you kick this thing off here. What's you have 3, I have 3. We're gonna go back and forth here. What's one of your biggest storylines you're looking at here as you head down to Spartanburg tonight or tomorrow?
I think we just got to address the elephant in the room, right? Let's just get that out of the way first.
Go ahead and do it.
Let's break down this quarterback situation. You bring in Baker Mayfield, but I think, from the outside, everyone just expects that this is going to be Mayfield's team right out of the gate. And you already knew as soon as this trade was going to go down that it was going to be deemed open competition. Everybody knows that. That's what Scott Fitter was going to say. That's what Matt Rule said today. We all knew that that's what the words were going to come out of those guys' mouths were. And at first I was like, I don't think I'm going to believe it when they do say that. But the more and more that I deeply thought about this, and I think I may have said this on the rundown a couple of weeks ago, you got to think about everything that goes into this. Yes, Baker Mayfield is 100% more talented than Sam Darnold, but you got to look at the time frame of when this deal happened, right? This happened in July. He had 2.5 weeks, if that, maybe not even 2.5 weeks, to kind of get a little bit of that playbook down before they get to Spartanburg. So he's going to get what? Maybe if you combine all of his in-game preseason reps into one performance, it may equal what he would do in one regular season game, maybe. So for him for Mayfield to come in and win this starting job, he's going to not only have to out-compete Sam Darnold in very limited action in preseason play, but then he's going to have to look even better than Sam in practice. And I don't think when you put Sam and Baker together that Baker's going to be the quarterback that stands out, because Sam's got the bigger arm. He's stronger. He's bigger. He can move around a lot better than Baker. So when you're just doing this kind of stuff, when you're doing the initial maybe 7-on-7 stuff, and you're going through the first week or so of training camp, Sam Darnold is going to look better, and he should, because he's been here in this offense for 4 or 5 months now.
Yeah. So
to me, I would probably lean towards saying, yes, Sam Darnold will be the guy that gets the most number 1 reps at the start. I don't know. I asked Matt Rule today. He didn't want to share. He said he'll let me know tomorrow. But I'll go ahead and quote what he said. He said that he hadn't had the conversations yet with said quarterback. So once he does that, he'll come back to me and tell me what's going to happen. Probably won't, but
yeah, I'm sure he'll top of his list. He's going to.
But what I think everyone's forgetting is, like I said, the time frame to come in for Baker is very, very short, and for him to learn everything in that quick of time, to gain that chemistry with his receivers and all that other stuff. And the other thing, there's 2 other things I want to put into this, 2 other components. One, Sam Darnold's still getting paid $18 million. I think that's getting forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money that I don't think they just want to be sitting on the sideline. If he has a chance to win this job, they may let him have that opportunity. The other thing is, I'm of the thinking that you can't go back to Sam Darnold once you turn on him, because the self-confidence has really never been there with Sam Darnold. We saw it last year. It's this big thing with him. He seems to not have the belief in himself to take his game to the next level. If you turn off of Sam Darnold now, there's no going back to him. I think if you start with Sam Darnold and things hit the fan, you can go to Baker and he's going to be okay because he has been through this before. He has been through adversity time and time again through his college career, his NFL career, and so on and so forth. So I think Baker is better equipped to be the guy that maybe doesn't start the season and then does because of unfortunate circumstances. I don't think you can do that the other way around.
Yeah, I would agree. And we talked about this, when we were on the rundown 2 weeks ago and I was having the internet issues. I kind of missed the entire Panthers segment that was going on. But one of the things I had brought up when they brought Baker in, my immediate thought was this is similar to like a Jake Delhomme type situation where if you saw someone like Cam Newton in his prime in practice, there was a chance you might see something in practice you've never seen like a human do before. Like he just physically, he stood out in terms of what he was as an athlete. Jake was never that. Jake never did anything in practice that made you go, oh, I've never seen, a pass like that before, or look at that spiral or anything like that. There was nothing he really did that kind of amazed you in practice. And he was just a Sunday baller. Like he would come out and he had a little Brett Favre in him, that Cajun feistiness to him. And I kind of see a little bit of that in Baker in terms of what attracted me to him as a player and what makes me not attracted to Sam Darnold. And we've talked about it on this podcast. It's that it factor that guys want to follow you, run the wall for you.
Working at the team. I mean, guys want to play for somebody like that.
Right. You want to follow somebody that's going to put their neck out and do something like that. There's nothing physically about Baker that wows you, but what he will do is the same thing as what Jake would do. He'll take chances. He'll try to stick it in some place where he probably has no business trying to put it in there. And every once in a while it'll work. And it'll be like, wow, how did that happen? That's a 75-yard touchdown in the Super Bowl. Who would have thought that would have come from, Jake Delhomme? Baker Mayfield is similar to that cut of cloth. Now, what I could see happening, and I do agree with you, Sam, has a head start. So if Sam is not the starter first quarter of week 1, I would actually be shocked because that means he was much further behind than we even thought in McAdoo's playbook because he's had it for a couple months before Baker did. I could see a situation unfold exactly the same way Jake Delhomme became the starter, which was 03 season, game 1, Rodney Peete is the starter. Jake Delhomme, no one really knows who he is, came from the Arena League. He's the backup. Rodney Peete turns in a stinker of a first half. I can't even remember who they were playing. It might have been Tampa. I can't remember who it was. And they start Jake second half. He comes in third quarter, leads him down the field for a touchdown. And just like that, it was like you knew they weren't going back to Rodney Peete. And Jake Delhomme was going to be the guy that year. And he took him on this magical ride that ended up in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. I could kind of see something like that happening. I'm reminding my friends because they're like, oh, you picked the Panthers to have 11 wins and oh my gosh, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, any year the Panthers have been like really good, like out the blue good, no one picked them for anything.
Yeah.
Like 05, 03, 2015, they weren't selected to be the odds-on favorite to win the NFC South or to make it to the Super Bowl or be like that squad. Whenever they have a year like that, it's out of nowhere. But people like us who follow them day after day, we can kind of see the components there. It's just a matter of can they put the ingredients together correctly to make the soup taste good? And I think they've got the ingredients. It really is going to come down to one of my actual storylines, and that's Matt Rule, Coach Matt Rule, in terms of people have said that he's been on a hot seat, and in theory he should be, but we haven't really caught that vibe that he's actually on a hot seat. In fact, Matt Rule, he's basically walked around as if he's not on a hot seat and has been reassured that he's not. David Tepper, the owner, doesn't really get into these things, and he did speak to us, when was that, right after the end of the season, before they stopped the
it was actually right before the draft, I believe.
So it would have been like in the February, March, somewhere in there. He came out. Yeah, and he kind of gave a stamp of, well, not a stamp of approval. He just said he wasn't going to fire the dude. Like, that's pretty much all he said. But again, I tell people all the time, David Tepper is the richest owner in the league for a reason. He is a billionaire for a reason. If he's not going to give a dude a 7-year, $60+ million deal, then fire him after year 2 when the first year was COVID and the dude couldn't even meet his players until July. Like, it's just, people gotta understand this.
And that third year, as we've pointed out many, many times, is that crucial year for Matt and his rebuild. Now, does that translate to the NFL? Is that same timeline look, similar to what it should, with his one in college? I don't know, but that's the guy's history, right? That's his blueprint. Year 3 is when you start winning football games. Why cut the guy loose before you get to that year where things are supposed to turn?
Yeah. I mean, they've been building to this year. Like, each year they have done something specific with the draft in the offseason. The first year, gut the entire defense, build the entire defense out of the draft, filled in the holes with some free agents, see if you can get lucky with a couple of those. They did with Hassan Reddick, Stephon Gilmore. They gave up a little bit of draft collateral for, kind of a wasted year, but we could see what they were doing. And then last year it was more about filling in more gaps on the defense, starting to fill in some gaps on offense, and trying to find a quarterback. This past offseason, it was strictly offensive line. We got to fix the offensive line. Everything else comes after that. And we saw from their moves, from what they've done. Head coach Matt Rule did speak to the media today via Zoom. Schuyler was in there asking questions. I did pull this clip from Matt Rule where I don't think this was you that was asking the question. I couldn't hear who it was, but they were asking him about being on the proverbial hot seat and how's it feel being on it, and did he ever feel like he was on it? It's a little bit of a longer clip, but I wanted to play it in its entirety because to me it kind of explains where Matt Rule is right now in his place as head coach of the Carolina Panthers. This audio courtesy of Panthers.com.
Last year's to me is over. It's kind of like golf. You play a bad round and you sit there and you say, you feel terrible about your game, and then all of a sudden you show up the next day and you play golf again, and it's like, hey, I could have a great round. And so I thought we did a lot of things well early in the year, and then just down the stretch I didn't get it done. We didn't get it done, and so that's our job. It's a results-oriented business, and I certainly don't want to be a part of an organization that tolerates mediocrity and a lack of success. And so that's got to start with me. So do you like that? No, but at the end of the day, I can promise you, like, my life is about winning and losing, and so I don't like losing. So that affected me as much as anything else. Things with my family. My son's here working as an equipment manager. He's going to go play ping pong with Christian McCaffrey today. You get amazing opportunities like that. Some bad stuff will come along the way, but I want to make sure I say this. People in Charlotte have been amazing to my family. Absolutely amazing. I'm a regular guy. You see me at the park, you'll see me out to eat with my wife. Like, I'm not, I'm nothing special. Like, I'm a regular guy. And so people, when I see them on the street, have been amazing. So this year I expect to win. I want to win. I've never had gone into a season and said, I hope I could only win this many games to keep my job. I'm not doing that, man. I want to win at the highest level, just like Christian does, just like Shaq does, just like everybody in this organization does. And that's why, I woke up today ready to go, excited to be here. And I like where we're at.
So my first big storyline is head coach Matt Rule. Like, you may not think you're on a hot seat, but in the eyes of the Carolina Panther fans, we're all kind of looking at you extra hard this year to make sure some of the things that we've noticed, time management, in-game decisions, things like that the head coach does. Now, I will say that Matt Rule's not as stubborn as you would expect an NFL coach to be. He did get off the whole Joe Brady thing, pretty quick. And it sounds like he was kind of recommended to hire Joe. He got off the whole bringing in college coaches things, got some pro coaches in here to round out his staff, kept Phil Snow, which I think was great because Phil's been doing his job, in terms of the defense and getting them together. But I do think Matt Rule is one of the big storylines going into 2022. If you're not in the state of North Carolina, pretty much the entire sporting media pretty much has him 1 foot out the door already. Like, they've been, it's nuts. It's like, oh, Matt Rule, we better start looking for a job. Here comes Sean Payton. I'm like, what? what
if you look at most sports books that have those odds of the future coaches that get fired, I think you're going to see Matt Rule probably at the top of that, probably at like plus 150 or something like that. But I mean, like you said, he's not stubborn. And I also think too, like, some of those decisions last year or even the last 2 years where you were like, what the heck is he doing? Why are these adjustments not being made? Why is this play being called? Why is this guy on the field? Why are we calling timeout here? What are we doing? Why are you kicking the field goal? Why are you punting? Like, why are you going for it? All these random questions that fans had during games. a lot of that could be taken off of his plate in terms of, or maybe not taken off his plate, but I think he'll be able to focus a lot more and really think about what those situations he needs to do in those situations. When you have Ben McAdoo now, you have James Campen now, you have Paul Pasqualoni now, you have Steve Wilkes, you have guys that have been around the NFL for a very, very long time. Those guys will be able to help Matt Rule out. And I think having those guys will take less responsibility, or more, will take some of that responsibility of Matt Rule to go around the whole team to where he can just focus on being the CEO of the team. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have to worry about, are the DBs getting coached up right? Are they being told what to do? Is the D-line doing this? He can focus on being a head coach. And I think that's the biggest thing that he hasn't been able to do the past 2 years because, I'm not trying to slight the guys that got fired, but they just didn't have that experience. They weren't quite ready for those jobs.
It showed too. It really showed too. And going back to your first storyline about the quarterbacks, Felipe Cardona is joining us on YouTube right now, and he wanted to ask, what do you think about that workout video with Baker and company excluding Robbie Anderson? I have not seen said video. I know that I know Baker and Sam together had the receivers together, or the offensive skill position players together, I think this past weekend, just to throw it around in Charlotte. I don't know how serious it is. I think Baker's the one that put it together. I think Sam did this last year with them, kind of, sort of. But again, it's kind of different when it's like Baker Mayfield to Sam Darnold in terms of that. Now, I did see video or pictures of Baker Mayfield with like DJ Moore, I think Shaq Thompson, and somebody else at the Charlotte FC game together. They were on the field walking together and waving at everybody and everything else. And people were like, oh, look, they're starting their relationship early and stuff like that. I'm like, it's just a picture. It's just a picture. It's fine. But them reaching out to Baker, trying to make him feel included. I think like guys like DJ Moore, hell, Sam Darnold, I think he'll help get Baker up to speed on the playbook. I don't take Sam as a guide to be like, he knows what it is. Like at this point, he knows the situation. So.
He's been, and one of Matt Rule's, I like to call them ruleisms, right? One of my favorite ruleisms is that he's an ultimate pro. And you know what? Say what you want to say about Sam Darnold. I surely do. I'm going to critique the guy when he's not playing well. I'm going to say some good stuff about him when he does. But the guy's handled this situation better than I think a lot of quarterbacks around the league would have in his situation, because you got to think this is a guy who was a number 3 pick in the NFL draft just 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
He's in his 5th year of his contract, so actually 5. But for somebody to go from the Jets in that situation, they give up on you. Now you come to Carolina and you feel like you have a front office and a coaching staff that fully believes in you, trusts in you, and is giving you the keys to the car. And then a year later, you're already seeing all these rumors about other quarterbacks being brought in via the draft, free agency, or trade. Yet he never once ever started any type of drama. He just let whatever happen. And he even welcomed Baker in. I think
he called him. Yeah.
Baker said he called him up.
Which is weird, but I don't know if I would call the guy that's been brought in to replace me. So.
I'd like to go back and look, because obviously we know who was here last year, but I'm not exactly sure who was with him during his time in New York. But you almost wonder, does this make Sam feel more comfortable? Because now he's got somebody else that's got experience in the NFL, has had some success, and maybe he's going to be able to relax a little bit because he doesn't feel that pressure of, it's me or the guy that, like PJ Walker, who everyone knows is probably not going to be the guy. You know what I mean? I think having that little bit of security, even though you don't want to think like that, we know, like, as we just documented, his self-confidence isn't as high as some of, the other guys in that quarterback group, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, that's all true. So we'll keep an eye on the quarterback. What's your second? I'm trying to keep you on pace here because I know you're super busy today. What's your second big storyline going into training camp?
Second one, offensive line. And I think that's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out. To me, I'm expecting it to be Ekwonu, Christensen, Bozeman, Corbett, Moton. So that's what I expect.
Yes, but let's go.
Who knows? We've heard that there's still some possibility that Brady could play left tackle, but I think that they're going to almost keep him from doing that. They really want to get him in there at left guard. The thing I want to see is how does that left guard center competition look like? Because if Brady Christensen has taken that step like Matt said he has, where he's not just one of the best players in the O-line, but the entire team, then you got to figure that line, that spot's already taken. So what's that do with Pat Elflein and Bradley Bozeman? Those two guys are going to battle it out at center. But to me, if it ends up somehow where they like Pat Elflein at center because that's his better spot and he's getting paid, decent money, I would rather him be at center than I would at left guard. Yeah. So Bozeman can play left guard, but is he better than Brady Christensen? So I think Pat Elflein is going to be the center of those two position battles. But I also think there's some guys on that offensive line that may be out of a job, like Dennis Daly, who's, I think, because of the additions they brought in this offseason, could be on the outside looking in. Cameron Irving, is he a guy that maybe is a veteran that gets cut?
Get him out of here.
That swing tackle, maybe. I don't know. May.
We did learn last year that depth is a key on the offensive line, and we do know that Matt Rule likes guys that can play multiple positions. So keep that in mind with some of these names that you're saying. Can they play guard? Can they play tackle too? Can they play center? Like that might be a determining factor.
And that's why I think Cade Mays, even though he was a 6th-round pick, not very, no one thinks that he's ready yet. But he can play all 5 positions, like literally all. He had played every single offensive line spot in the spring. So they like him. The one guy I'm really interested to see what happens is Deontay Brown, because he had to shed 30 pounds since he got drafted, yet he's been battling injuries. He hasn't got quite into game shape yet. Didn't allow a sack at Alabama, but hasn't really, done much here. He played in 3 games last year, had 30 snaps. Is he going to take a step this preseason? I think this preseason is going to be very crucial for him, because if he doesn't show anything, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets let go. So it's a numbers game when it all comes down to everything. So we'll see what happens. But I definitely expect this to be a much improved unit. And as we have said many, many times on various different shows, probably a top 12, top 14, maybe top 10 offensive line.
If they can do that and go from where they were, which was probably 28th, 29th, 30th in the league in terms of offensive line play, if they can be a top 15 unit, you're talking literally probably an additional 3 wins, just like right there, because the Panthers don't really get blown out because of how good their defense is. If you really go back and look, since Matt Rule's been here, I think they've really only lost by more than 12 or 14 points, maybe once or twice. I think Tampa blew them out towards the end of the year. I can't really remember any other times. Like they went toe-to-toe with Kansas City and Arrowhead. Like they can play against these teams. Their problem has been getting over the hump and actually winning some of these close games. And you hope in year 3 that with the talent you brought in, that'll be a little bit of a difference. My second big storyline, and it's the other elephant that's sitting in the room, and it's been sitting there for about 2 years now. Christian McCaffrey, can he stay healthy? This team is a completely different team when Christian McCaffrey is out there. Like, imagine being an opposing defensive coordinator and you're having to scheme for the Panthers with a healthy Christian McCaffrey, as opposed to having a whole week scheming for the Panthers with Christian McCaffrey not in uniform. Like, it's just a completely different mindset. Like, oh, I can bring these guys now. Oh, I don't have to worry about the flat. Oh, that guy can't catch as well as CMC. I can do this. I can take DJ Moore out the game. I can do all these different things. With McCaffrey in the game, there's a reason why Madden gave him the 98 or whatever they gave him for his rating or whatever, even though he hasn't played in 2 seasons. If he is not the jacked up, chiseled Christian McCaffrey, which, to be honest, he's always kind of looked like that. Even coming out of Stanford, he's always kind of had that physique. But something I thought that was super curious and great, one of my favorite NFL players of all time, Christian McCaffrey reached out to, and that's Marshall Faulk in the offseason, just to kind of get some hints and tips on, hey, what am I doing wrong? What should I do? I don't know if people remember what Marshall Faulk looked like with his shirt off. He looked like the dude never lifted a weight in his life. Like, literally, like he wasn't like that chiseled dude. And he, for the most part, avoided injury until towards the end of his career. He's been stressing it's really more about flexibility and, working out that way and keeping keeping those joints loose so that, things don't stretch and pop and tear and things very quickly, because it's also just like tightly wound in there. And Christian says he's taking that to heart. The coaching staff, Matt Rule did mention they weren't going to change a whole lot with what they do with Christian, but then they turned around and pretty much held him out the entire mini camp that they just had. And I imagine he'll probably not play any preseason, and he probably won't practice a whole lot in terms of contact in the training camp either. I would imagine they're going to treat him with kid gloves going into this, which they should at this point. He'll be ready to go September 11th. I'm not worried about that. But if they can keep Christian McCaffrey the majority of the season healthy, this Panther team turns from a 5-12 team into something else. And we haven't seen that yet. And I'm hoping he's the key to me. Whichever quarterback is under center, either one of them will benefit if Christian McCaffrey is their running back. If he's the tailback, Darnold or Mayfield will have a much better stat line than if he's not in there. So for me, the second one is CMC. Go ahead if you want to.
Yeah,
McCaffrey.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, I think Christian. You can sit there and say that running backs don't mean anything, and at the end of the day, they may not. But Christian's more than just a running back. We've all known this.
He got paid like he was more than a running back too.
Yeah. So I mean, if you look at the last 2 years, what's he played in 10 games? I think so.
Yeah. Ever since he signed the deal, he's played in like 10 of like, what was it, like 24 available games or something like that. So,
yeah. So I mean, Matt Rule has no idea what it's even like to have Christian McCaffrey. So to me, like, we don't know what a Matt Rule coach team with a healthy Christian McCaffrey can do. Does it take them from a 5-win team to a 10-win team? I don't know, but nobody knows. Like, we have no history of it. So I think that's going to be interesting. If he can get, I say 13 to 14 games in, I think they'll be, kind of on that cusp of the playoffs. But I don't know. It's going to be tough. I think we'll have to see how it unfolds. But I think he will be healthy this year. It's my bold prediction. You can come back and yell at me if I'm wrong.
I was going to say, we got to do bold predictions in a couple weeks for a whole episode. So we'll put a pin in that and come back around to to that in a couple of weeks here. What's your third and final biggest storyline of the upcoming 2022 Panthers training camp?
Yeah, so my third one is going to be that third wide receiver. And actually, depending on who you're talking about here, you could say maybe number 2. Because does Robbie Anderson look like he did last year? Does he look like he did 2 years ago? Or is it kind of a little bit of both? Because if Terrace Marshall can finally take that step, now I know he's only been in Carolina a year, but we saw those glimpses last year in preseason. We saw it all training camp. We get to the regular season, disappears. We get back to the offseason workouts. You see him in mini camp and OTAs. Dude looks phenomenal. Does that happen again, or does it carry over to regular season play? And now he's the cemented number 3 receiver? Because if he comes up and steps up in production, you've got DJ, Robbie, Terrace, and then you also have Rashard Higgins, who's not too bad of a number 4 option too.
That's right, and has a relationship with Baker coming from Cleveland.
So you have 4 receivers. You have the 2 tight ends and Tommy and Ian, and then you've got those running backs in the backfield. Like, that's a lot to work with for Ben McAdoo. But if Robbie isn't himself again, or is what he was a year ago, and Terrace Marshall doesn't take that step, this whole offense can't tap into another level. They're going to stay right where they were, which is probably bottom 3, bottom 4 of the league. So it's who steps up as that number 3 receiver. Is it Terrace Marshall? Is it Rashard Higgins? Is it maybe even Shi Smith? I don't know. But I think one of those guys has to step up. And if it's Terrace Marshall, like I said, he could maybe leapfrog Robbie and be the number 2 guy. And I think the Panthers would actually love to see that happen, because he's going to be cheaper longer down, when it comes to over the next couple of years. Maybe if he shows out and out competes Robbie this year, you can maybe trade Robbie in the offseason. And now you got Terrace as your number 2. So this is a big season for Terrace Marshall.
I totally agree. I like the Higgins pickup when they did it, especially now with Baker here, because he's going to have somebody that kind of knows his tendencies and things of that sort. So that might actually help Rashard in the end, having Baker here. Was Terrace Marshall a Joe Brady pick, do you think? You think they did that just because Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator and had a relationship with him at LSU, and then when Brady was let go, it kind of put Marshall kind of out there in the wind by himself? Do you think that had anything to do with it?
I think it may have had a little bit to do with it. That history, obviously, I'm sure Joe vouched for him in the pre-draft process and everything. But, actually, I'd probably say it had a lot to do with it. If you really think about it. The guy was never the guy at LSU, right? He was like the fourth option in that offense.
Right, yeah, and that crazy offense. But, I mean, I like the flashes we did see. It was kind of odd that he was kind of a scratch for multiple games at the end of the year when you would think they would be playing some of the younger guys to get a look at him, and we just didn't really see a lot of Terrence as the season went on. But, he's that off-season dude. We hear about him a lot in the off-season, showing out in camp and everything else. So
we'll preseason darling.
Yeah, preseason darling. So we'll see. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of TM during the preseason this year as Baker and Sam, hell, and PJ and Matt are going to be throwing at him in these preseason games. My third and final big training camp storyline is a guy that a lot of people have forgotten about, but I'm super excited to see, and that's last year's first-round draft pick, J.C. Horn. For all accounts, he's 100% healthy, ready to go. You had posted an article on All Panthers for Sports Illustrated back in June, actually, where there was a list of bandwagons to hop on in 2022 from Adam Shine of NFL.com, and it had in it a number of different things, and one of the things was J.C. Horn. He only played really 2.5 games last season. He got hurt in the third game against Houston, which was basically a devastating game for the Panthers. They lost McCaffrey in that game. They lost Horn in that game. I think they lost a lineman in that game. They just got beat up on a short week, and it kind of affected the rest of the season. But J.C. Horn, people forget, he was only allowing a 39.6 passer rating against him, and he had an interception against the Saints the week before. He was drafted 8th overall. He got drafted over Patrick Surtain II, over Micah Parsons, over Justin Fields, Mac Jones, the first cornerback off the board, if I'm not mistaken. And they feel like he can be a shutdown corner. He's pretty much everything you want in a cornerback in today's NFL. He's loud. He's boisterous. He's just like his dad, Joe Horn, the former wide receiver from the Saints. He's very confident in his abilities. You kind of want that in a cornerback in terms of cornerback and wide receiver are like the two positions that are basically out on an island by themselves. And you have to kind of have some sort of, the best wide receivers, the best cornerbacks, if you think back on them, are usually the ones that have some sort of attitude or some sort of self-confidence. So like you could be someone like a
Jalen Ramsey,
but you could also be like somebody like a Jerry Rice, where he's not going to be arrogant and in your face, but he's so super confident in his abilities. He just looks different than everybody else. So it's like that. And J.C. Horn kind of sits in that Josh Norman world of cornerbacks where he's got a lot of confidence in himself. He's going to talk, but he can kind of back it up. And with him being 23, 24, it was a freak injury, broke his foot. By all accounts, everything's good to go. I saw him make some crazy one-handed catch online a week or two ago that just looked impossible to do, that he did with ease. I'm looking forward to seeing him in the secondary, which to me is the strongest group out of all the groups on the Panthers. It's the secondary. They're the deepest. They've got talent. Dante Jackson will be starting on the other side from him. You got CJ Henderson that'll probably play slot. These are all first-round guys. Well, Dante wasn't a first-round guy. He was drafted in the second or third, but he's played himself into a new contract. If I'm not mistaken, Steve Wilks, is he back as the secondary coach? Is that the position he took? So last time Steve Wilks was here was during, if I'm not mistaken, it was during that season where Josh Norman had a career year. And the secondary was just literally just snatching things out of the air. I want to see this secondary with Steve Wilks coaching it after the year they had last year, to have Steve Wilks back in the house with the experience he has. And we already know what he's going to do on defense. We know how he gets down. I think the secondary can have a career year collectively for Carolina. And the way the league is now with pass, if you've got a pass defense that's not allowing a lot of stuff, you're in pretty good company. We were basically back and forth with Buffalo all year last year in terms of 1 and 2 pass defense, overall defense. And, of course, Buffalo had more on the offensive side of the ball, so they were able to do a lot more. But we were right there with them defensively, which sounds crazy to say because everyone's on the Buffalo bandwagon. No one is on the Panther defense bandwagon. And I get it. You gotta do something to get people on the bandwagon. But again, whenever the Panthers have a really good year, the national media, they weren't picking them early. When the national media picks them early, that's when they have a bad year. It's usually the year after they have the surprise good year. So like 2003, they make it to the Super Bowl. They're the last undefeated team in the regular season. The media's like, oh my gosh, they've got like a dynasty brewing here. Oh, so 2004, it's like everyone, Sports Illustrated, everybody's picking the Panthers to go back to the Super Bowl. What happens? Steve Smith breaks his leg. First game, Monday Night Football against the Packers. They lose like their first like 8 games or something nuts. And then DeLome leads them on like a 7-game win streak at the end of the year. And they almost sneak into the playoffs. But again, it's because the national media picked them. Same thing 2015. Nobody picked the Panthers to go 14-0 to start the season and Cam Newton have an MVP year. They were 7-8-1 the year before. Like no one picked them to do this. And they come out of nowhere, take the nation by storm. You got old white ladies dabbing on like street corners. And you know what I mean? Like, it's just craziness. Like everyone's all on board for this. They get to the Super Bowl. They pick the wrong day to have a bad day. The national media jumps on the bandwagon again. Oh, 2016. Who's going to be in the Super Bowl? It's the Panthers versus everybody else. Like they've already decided it's going to be the Panthers. What happens? The whole thing falls apart. Like that's the pattern the Panthers have had, no matter the coach. If they've had a great year and got to the Super Bowl, the next year the whole media is on top of them and they just fall under expectations. I'm not saying they're going to make the Super Bowl. I'm not saying they're even going to win the division. I'm just saying nobody's picking them and they've got some talent. That's
yeah. And
that's all.
The secondary, real quick. Phil Snow had said like that they had played very well in the secondary. Obviously, if you just look at the numbers, but there were certain situations where they didn't hold up. They didn't get off the field. And I think that's kind of one of the next steps they need to take. The other thing is they need to create more turnovers. And I think when you bring in a guy like Steve Wilks, he's going to teach these guys like you can't always just play conservative. There's a time to be aggressive. There's a time to be a little bit relaxed, but you have to find that balance. And I think with J.C. Horn being healthy, we didn't get to see him like you said. We saw him for 2.5 games.
Yeah.
So I think he's a guy that's going to create a bunch of turnovers because when you look at the other side, you got Dante Jackson. Everyone knows Dante Jackson. They're going to sit there and try and pick on J.C. Horn all year long, and It's not going to work.
Yeah, please do.
So I think it's going to end up well. They're going to create more turnovers. They're going to get off the field in more situations. That aggression is going to be there more than it was a year ago. And, I think that they're just going to take that whole secondary to another level. Xavier Woods, I'm telling you, mark it down now, July 25th.
Yes.
This is going to be one of the most key additions for this defense. You may not hear his name because he's not going to be maybe picking 10 balls off or, doing a whole bunch of stuff like that. But he is going to be a key cog in the back end of that defense, communicating, making sure people are where they're supposed to be, help being a leader in that back end with that young secondary. So Xavier Woods is going to help take this defense to another level, just like Steve Wilks.
Xavier Woods and Jeremy Chin at safety with Dante Jackson and J.C. Horn. And they play a nickel kind of. They play like a 5-2 like amoeba defense type thing. It's like a 3-3-5 kind of layout that switches around a lot. And I kind of started noticing what they were doing halfway through the year because sometimes they'll line 4, sometimes they'll bring 3. They'll go from 3-4 to 4-3 like in the middle of a series kind of type thing.
Multiple.
Yeah, and most of the guys that are out there can stay out in the field. So you're probably looking at a secondary of J.C. Horn, Jeremy Chin, Xavier Woods, C.J. Henderson, and Dante Jackson. So I mean, that's going to be your 5 right there, and you've got guys like Troy Pride that can come in.
Not anymlah. He's not here. He's not.
He's gone now.
Yeah, they do. They still do have Rashawn Melvin. Kalen Barnes, a 7th-round pick. Stanley Thompson, potentially.
Shout out to Barnes, who got the highest speed rating in Madden. Even though he was, 7th-round pick, he ran a 4.24 or something at the 40, something nut like Bo Jackson speed.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what he ran, but yeah, he's an absolute flyer, and I don't think he's going to play much on corner, but special teams, that's where he can leave his mark.
Can he return? Can he return kicks?
That's a good question. I don't know if he did much of that at Baylor. he may have flirted with a little bit. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
well,
as a gunner, I mean,
yeah,
I would take him as a.
I mean,
you want just a guy on the roster as a gunner, but
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like at 4.24 speed, I want him out there with the jug machine, just learning how to catch kickoffs and punts, and like, hey, we got to figure out something. You could be like, the next dude on kickoffs or whatever that gets known for it.
Under too, and Andre Roberts.
So we'll see if Barnes and these other guys that got picked later in the draft but have special attributes that Matt Rule likes, speed especially. This is a fast team. This is a fast team across the board, the way they've built it, offense, defense, special teams. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them as we go forward. We're at the end here. I got to get Schuyler out of here. We'll be back next week. Our new times Mondays. We'll start dropping these new episodes on Mondays, probably after the Panther press conference, because they're usually on Monday afternoons, right? So we'll probably drop these mid-afternoon for the season. So you've got the entire week to listen to or watch the podcast. Congratulations to Bleav. In the offseason, they made a deal with Sirius XM Radio. We are now on Sirius XM, the app. So if you have that app on your phone or tablet or device, you can pull up Bleav and all the programs. I believe there's a Bleav podcast for each of the NFL teams right now. We are happy to be your Carolina Panther podcast for that. If not, you can catch us on any major podcast format, Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, Anchor, pretty much anywhere. It's on TuneIn, if I'm not mistaken, as well. And of course, you can catch the video version of this on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio YouTube channel, as well as our Facebook pages and my LinkedIn and Twitter account. So for Schuyler Callihan, again, on Twitter, Callihan_. Follow him through the week at training camp at Panthers. Desmond Johnson, my Twitter account, Des, DEZ_3505. We'll be back next week. We might open a mailbag or something. I don't know. Let's do something with the fans and see where their minds are at, because they're all probably worried about something that we haven't even addressed. So we'll get to that as we get into this preseason as well. But for my man Schuyler, I'm Des. We will talk to you next week. You've been listening and watching the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast. Keep pounding.